They banned this interview for a reason. What Carl Jung said here wasn't meant for the masses. It was too raw, too honest, too dangerous. But now that it's resurfaced, you're about to hear exactly why the world tried to silence him. If you've ever felt there's something dark within you, something you can't explain, keep watching. Because Jung is about to tell you why that darkness isn't your enemy, it's your doorway. The man across from Jung looked skeptical. He had heard about the shadow, but couldn't accept it. Are you saying, he asked, that everyone is evil inside? Jung didn't flinch. No, he said, with a quiet intensity. I am saying that everyone is incomplete inside, and until you look into the darkness, you will never be whole. That moment in the interview is what changed everything. The idea that your darkest impulses, your rage, your shame, your envy, are not to be hidden or destroyed, but integrated. Jung explained it with the precision of a surgeon and the compassion of someone who had met his own demons and learned their names. You see, Jung continued, the shadow is not bad. It simply is. It's the part of you that was cast away to survive. When you were told not to cry, not to shout, not to want, that part of you didn't die. It went underground, and it waits. This is what they never taught you, that the parts of yourself you've buried, your desires, your anger, your darkness, they're still alive. And the more you suppress them, the more power they gain. Jung warned that a person who denies their shadow becomes a puppet, a shell, pretending to be good while secretly being controlled by the very thing they fear. He leaned forward in the chair, voice steady. We live in a society that worships light but forgets the price of ignoring the dark. The unconscious does not disappear. It retaliates. It leaks into our behaviors, our relationships, our addictions. The interviewer pressed him. So what should we do with the shadow? How do we fight it? Jung shook his head. You do not fight the shadow. You face it. You study it. You listen. Only then does it lose its power over you. The atmosphere in the room changed. The silence was heavier than before, as if even the walls were listening. He continued, the most dangerous people are not those who embrace their darkness. It's those who deny it, who pretend they are only good. They are blind to their own capacity for harm. He told a story. A patient who came to him deeply religious, kind, charitable. And yet, he could not stop sabotaging his own life. His relationships fell apart. His body suffered. Why? Because he had repressed his anger for decades. He had been taught that anger was sin, Jung said, so he buried it. But what is buried becomes poison. Jung said it is not sin to feel darkness. It is sin to lie about it, to yourself. The man who says, I am only good is asleep. The man who says, I have good, and I have darkness, and I choose which one I feed. He is awake. This was the part of Jung's work people feared most, because it didn't promise safety. It didn't offer comfort. It asked for responsibility. It asked you to look into the parts of yourself that terrify you and to take ownership. You are not a saint, he said firmly. You are a human being. That is enough. The interviewer seemed disturbed. But isn't that dangerous? If people explore their darkness, couldn't they become worse? Jung paused for a long time. Then he said, only if they do it unconsciously. If you do not approach the shadow with honesty and awareness, yes, it can consume you. But if you face it with intention, if you look into your own soul with open eyes, you become more powerful than any fear. That's what this banned interview revealed. That power does not come from perfection. It comes from integration. The ability to hold light and darkness in the same hands. To know you are capable of destruction and still choose creation. He spoke of Hitler, not to justify, but to warn. The man who rose to power in Germany, he said, was not a monster from another planet. He was a mirror, a collective shadow. The embodiment of millions who refused to look inward, and so their shadow rose outside them. This was too much for many. to say that evil is not always born, it's projected. When we deny what we are capable of, we make others carry it for us. Scapegoats, enemies, monsters. When in truth, the monster lives in the mirror, and healing begins when we stop looking away. Jung's voice softened. I do not speak of the shadow to frighten you. I speak of it because I trust you. I believe the human spirit is strong enough to face its own reflection. This was not the message the world wanted. They wanted heroes and villains, good and evil, clean lines. Jung gave them something messier, something truer. That the path to real healing is not found in pretending. It's found in courage, the courage to say, there are things in me I do not understand, but I will not run. I will not hide. I will learn. And then he said something that stunned even the cameraman, who later admitted he almost dropped the equipment when he heard it. The shadow is your ally, Jung said. If you treat it with respect, if you reject it, it becomes your enemy. But if you learn from it, it will guide you to your purpose, because your greatest wound is often where your calling hides. Pause there. Let that sink in. Because in a world that teaches you to numb, to ignore, to project, Carl Jung is inviting you to awaken. Not by being perfect, but by being whole. The interviewer leaned back, clearly shaken by Jung's last words. So you believe, he said cautiously, that pain can actually point us to our purpose. Jung didn't hesitate. Yes, not only can it, it must. There was no hesitation in his voice, no ambiguity. You see, he said, human beings are not made whole by avoiding suffering. We are made whole by giving it meaning. When you run from pain, you become fragmented. But when you face it and ask, why are you here? Something begins to shift inside you. That silence returned, thick, electric. Jung continued, the shadow contains not only the things we fear, but also the gifts we were too afraid to claim. Your suppressed creativity, your rage at injustice, your longing for authenticity. These are not curses, they are clues. The interviewer frowned. But how does a person even begin to face something that's unconscious? If it's in the shadow, how can I see it? Jung smiled slightly. You see it by what disturbs you, what you judge in others, what triggers you. The people you hate, the behaviors you cannot stand, these are mirrors. The shadow is always speaking. Most just don't want to hear. That sentence alone could change a life. The idea that your emotional reactions are not random, they are a signal. A signal pointing directly to something inside yourself that has not yet been made conscious. Jung leaned forward, hands folded. You may believe your life is shaped by your conscious choices, but I tell you this, the unconscious decides far more than you realize. And unless you bring it into the light, it will control your life and you will call it fate. He said that most people suffer not because of outer circumstances, but because they are ruled by inner forces they refuse to acknowledge. Guilt, shame, fear, pride, they all have a voice in the unconscious, and they all vote. That is why we repeat patterns, he said. Why we end up with the same kind of partner, the same kind of failure, the same kind of suffering. Because we are haunted by what we refuse to see. And still, he did not speak with judgment. He spoke with compassion. A compassion born not of theory, but of experience. Jung had spent years facing his own darkness. He had gone mad, broken down, seen visions. He didn't speak about the psyche from the outside. He had walked through the fire himself. He described a time when he nearly lost his mind. Dreams so vivid, so terrifying, he feared he'd never return. But instead of resisting, he followed them. Listened to them. That descent, he said, was the beginning of my real work. You cannot heal the soul if you are afraid of its depths. That was the turning point of the interview. No longer was it theory. It was confession. It was raw truth. A man who had touched madness and emerged with wisdom. You must understand, he said slowly, Your psyche is not trying to hurt you. It is trying to awaken you. The nightmare is not a punishment. It is a message. The interviewer asked, "So how do we interpret the message?" Jung closed his eyes briefly, then said, "By being willing to feel, to see, to stop running. When you feel rage, don't suppress it. Ask what part of you is crying for justice. When you feel jealousy, ask what unlived part of your soul is begging for attention." He wasn't giving easy answers. He was giving tools. Tools to become fully human. Every unlived life, he said, becomes the shadow, and every shadow seeks expression. That's when he dropped another truth that the censors would later claim was too disruptive for public airing. If you do not find a way to give your darkness expression consciously, he said, it will erupt unconsciously through self-sabotage, addiction, illness, or violence. Let that settle, because that is the terrifying gift of the shadow. It will not be denied. You can either meet it with awareness or be dragged by it unconsciously through chaos. He said the root of evil is not the presence of darkness, but the absence of self-awareness. And then, almost as if anticipating the resistance of a modern world addicted to quick fixes, Jung said, "This is not fast work. It is not comfortable. But it is the only work that matters, to become whole." The interviewer, his voice quieter now, asked, "But what if someone is afraid? What if they don't want to go there?" Jung nodded. "Then they must wait. Until the suffering becomes louder than the fear. Because one day, it will." He spoke of the collective psyche, that the shadow is not only personal, it is cultural, generational, societal. A nation can have a shadow, a religion, a family. That's why wars erupt, why injustice persists, because the collective shadow remains unexamined. And what we refuse to look at, we will unconsciously act out. But there is hope, he said softly, because consciousness is contagious. When one person integrates their shadow, they affect everyone around them. They become less reactive, more whole, and they offer others permission to do the same. That is the revolution Jung envisioned, not political, not violent, but internal. A quiet army of awakened individuals who have faced their own darkness and chosen integration over denial. You want to change the world? He asked. Start by changing how you relate to your shadow. That is the beginning of everything. He looked directly at the camera for the first time, as if speaking through time to those of us watching now. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to become real, to become conscious. That is what the soul longs for. And with that, the interview began to draw to a close, but the impact of what was said had only just begun to ripple outward. The shadow is not evil. It is not a curse. It is a map, a guide, a whisper from the soul saying, "There is more to you than you know. Come and see." The interviewer, visibly moved, had no more questions. But Jung's gaze never wavered. He knew the power of silence. He understood that when the truth lands, it doesn't need further commentary. It simply needs to be absorbed. For a moment, there was only stillness between them. And then Jung broke it once more, his voice soft yet filled with undeniable gravity. "You see," he said, "when you begin to face your shadow, you start to see the world differently. You stop blaming others. You stop seeing yourself as a victim. You stop needing approval. And the power that was once hidden in your darkness, you reclaim it. It wasn't about becoming good. It was about becoming whole." That was the message the world didn't want to hear. It's the message that scared those in power. That true power doesn't lie in being untouchable or morally perfect. True power lies in being human, in accepting all of who you are, both light and dark. And Jung's final words during the interview were his clearest, most penetrating. They hit with the force of truth that could not be ignored, even by those who tried to silence him. The greatest enemy of the modern world, he said, is not darkness itself. It is the refusal to face it. It is the lie that we are separate from our own shadow. That is the illusion. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him, his eyes filled with the wisdom of a man who had wrestled with his own demons and come out stronger for it. To live fully, you must embrace your whole self, he continued. And this, more than any doctrine or belief, is the path to freedom. It was then that the interviewer, almost in disbelief, asked, "But what if people don't understand? What if they judge us for embracing our dark sides?" Jung gave a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "They will. Of course they will. People always judge what they fear." He paused, his eyes locking with the interviewer's, as though seeing straight into his soul. "But when you embrace the shadow within you, you no longer need the approval of others. You have freed yourself from their judgments, because you no longer hide." This was the essence of Carl Jung's message. Freedom is found not in light, not in perfection, but in integration. In making peace with the parts of yourself that you've been taught to reject. It's not a single event or decision. It's a process. It's a lifelong commitment to growing, learning, and healing from the inside out. Jung's teachings were not about escaping pain or darkness, but about learning how to navigate it. He understood that to live a truly fulfilled life, you must embrace everything you are, including the parts of you that scare you the most. Only then can you begin to heal, to transform, and to live with integrity. The interviewer, now grappling with the depth of what Jung had shared, finally asked, "But can this really change the world? Can one person truly make a difference?" Jung's answer was simple, yet profound. Of course, every person who embraces their shadow, who chooses to heal rather than deny their pain, sends out ripples into the collective consciousness. One person's transformation can spark a movement. He leaned forward, the intensity in his eyes sharpening. "You must understand, this is how the world will change, not through violence or revolution, but through the quiet courage of individuals who choose to live authentically. The true power of transformation begins inside." The camera crew, who had been silently recording the entire time, began to stir. The interview was drawing to a close, but the words had already begun to settle in. The power of Carl Jung's message was undeniable. And while the world might have tried to silence him, his voice echoed through time, reverberating in the hearts and minds of those willing to listen. The interviewer, now sitting in complete silence, simply nodded. There was nothing left to say. Jung had spoken the truth, and truth, once revealed, cannot be unheard. It can only be embraced. And as the interview came to an end, Jung's final words remained, "To face the shadow is to face yourself. And when you do, you will realize that you were never alone. The darkness, the pain, the fear, they were never enemies. They were simply guides, and they led you to your truest self." Those words lingered in the air long after the camera stopped rolling, and they continue to echo, centuries later, for anyone willing to confront their own darkness and step into the light of truth.